Hi, this is Ted Bowman. I'm a trainer and module developer with 6 Mile Tech. 6 Mile Tech offers custom Drupal training. We also have a Drupal 7 module development course if you want to learn Drupal 7 module development online. You can find out about all that at 6miletech.com. I'm going to introduce a new module I have called Token Conditions, but this is really the process of how I went about making the module. And this is an example of how you can tackle new problems in Drupal 8. Drupal 8 is drastically different from Drupal 7 underneath the hood. So if you're a module developer in Drupal 7, or if you're new to Drupal and want to learn how to start working with module development, this is just an example of how I did it with this pretty simple module. So this module is called Token Conditions, and basically it gives you a condition that you can use to show or hide blocks. So if we look at the screenshot here, you'll see content types, pages, roles, and then a new one here called Token Matcher. And in this case, I'm looking for a node title which has the regex string TED in it. So anything that has the title and the text TED in it is going to show this block. So if we look at our sample site right here, we have an article, and this is an article by an author, not by myself. So I'm logged in right now as admin, and so we have an about the author block here. But if we look at an article that I wrote, I'm admin, then we don't have the about the author, we have the you created this block. So let's look how this is configured. So if I edit this and click configure block, then I go down to the visibility settings. Well, look, none of the settings are set except for the new token matcher. And in this case, I'm matching the string node, or the token rather, node author UID, which is going to be whoever's wrote the current node on the page, to current user UID. So if the current user is the user who wrote the current node, then show this block. So that's why the block's shown here. But when I look at an article written by somebody else, we have about the author. So let's see how that's configured. This is actually a view block that just lists the author of the current node. So that's just a standard view block in Drupal 8, but I add the same condition here, node author UID, current user UID, and then on this condition, I just say negate the condition. So basically, when the person who signed in is not the author of the node. So it's a pretty simple module. That's how we're using it on this example site. If we go back to the page on Drupal.org, there's some other examples of how you might use it if the title contains a string, if a field value contains a string, if a field is empty. The current author is the current user. That's what we're doing. Of course, also we can negate that. And the current node author doesn't have a picture. The current node was authored in the current month. There's some issues with tokens in Drupal 8. I've linked to a couple issues on Drupal.org about that. So that's still a work in progress, the token system for Drupal 8. At this point, this is pre-release candidate for Drupal 8. So it looks interesting, though, that the tokens look like they're going to be very robust in Drupal 8. So I'm basically going to remove this module from this site, and we're going to start over with a site that doesn't have this on there and look at the basics of creating a module like this. Okay, so here we're looking at the same Drupal site, except I removed that module. We have one block over here on the left, which is just showing content by author. This is just a view that I made. So if we go click here and configure block, we'll see we're back to the content types, pages, and roles. So anytime I'm trying to make a Drupal 7 or Drupal 8 Contrib module or a custom module, and I want to emulate or make something similar to something that core or another module already has, I first try to, especially if it's core, considering that core is probably doing it the right way, I want to look at core and try to figure out how it's doing what it's doing. So if we look at we have three visibility conditions on all blocks. So we have content types, pages, and roles. So this is the same as Drupal 7, but probably this is done in a different manner. So if I'm looking at some functionality in Drupal 7 or Drupal 8 in a core or Contrib module, and I want to figure out how this functionality is made so I can make something similar to it. Often what I'll do is I want to figure out where exactly this page part is coming from. How does it restrict by pages? And so to find where this is in the code and core, what I can do is I can just copy this string. So presumably this string lives somewhere in a module in Drupal 8. So I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go over to PHP Storm. This is what I've been using for Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 for a while. And I'm going to look at the file system. So right now in Drupal 8, this is my D8 conditions test site. We have core, which is where all of core is, then modules. This is where our module would live, profiles, sites, and themes. So I want to look inside core, and I want to look inside the modules folder within core. So I'm going to look inside that directory in PHP Storm and look for this exact text, and I'm going to look for it case sensitive. So I was lucky in that this is only found one place. So presumably this is where that functionality in core is coming from. So I'm going to open up that file and I'm going to look where the file is. So this is a PHP class file, and if I see where it is, I want to scroll from source, and this is inside the system module and then down under a folder called source or SRC, and then plugin. This is where Drupal stores, each module will store its plugin implementations here, and then condition. So that tells me that Drupal 8 implements a condition plugin. So I didn't know this when I was first attacking this problem because originally this wasn't the case. But then I think through Drupal 8 rules initiative, they really wanted to get a condition system inside Drupal core. So this is used by Page Manager now. I think it'll be used by panels. It's also being used by the rules module in Drupal 8. So let's look at what this one does. So I want to go up to the class definition, and it's a class called request path, and it extends something called condition plugin base, and then a container factory plugin interface. So I'm probably going to want to make a class that's really similar to this to make my module work. So there's two things I could do. I could just copy this file and then just search and replace everything that I need, or I could start from scratch. So let's actually look what it would look like to start from scratch, because there's actually a lot of stuff in here I'm not going to need. So I'm going to make a module, and so I could just go in to, I've already made a folder under the modules directory. I'm going to close out core, look at modules, and I have a custom directory here which has nothing in it yet. So I could create a module in here. There's no sites all modules folder in Drupal 8. You just have your modules for core under core, and then any modules that you download or that you make will be under just the modules directory. And I'm going to put my custom modules under Contrib. So I am going to not make the module to start off with by hand. What I'm going to use is something called the Drupal Console. So if we go over to my terminal, so I'm at the base of my Drupal site, and I have the Drupal Console installed. So if I just type Drupal, this is going to give me all the commands that I currently have available, and there's more commands because I'm actually in a Drupal site. And so this is a Symfony console project, or built on the Symfony console, and it's sort of an alternative to Drush, but one of the things it gives you is a way to generate modules. And so this can be done also in Drush using the module builder, but I'm going to generate my module using the Drupal console. So I'm copying generate module, and I'm going to say Drupal generate module, and it's going to ask me it's going to give me a series of questions to make my module. So this is the module name. I'm going to call it token conditions, and this is actually, I got the machine name wrong, so I'm just going to leave that as the default. Anything you see there in the yellow is the default. And where do I want it? I want it in modules custom, that's right. Module description, I'm going to say conditions based on tokens. And package, I'll just put it in token. I'm not sure if that's a good package. And 8.x first core, that's fine. Do I want to include a JSON composer file? Yes, I do, even though right now I'm not going to use it. But this will make it so that if somebody wants to make a composer or use composer to make a Drupal 8 project, then my module will play nice with that. And do I want to add any dependencies? Right now I'm not going to add any dependencies. I could make it dependent on the block module, but technically I think it's I don't need to do that. And do I want to confirm generation? Yes. Let's flip back over to PHP Storm to take a look at it. So it made the token conditions folder, and it made a composer file. It also made a info.yaml file. So this would replace your ini file in Drupal 8. It's very similar to an ini file. One thing you'll notice is it does have the type module right there. And then it has a .module file, which is technically not necessary for a Drupal 8 module. Right now it has the implementation of help hook. So all of your hook implementations are still in there. But as you'll see as we go through this, a lot of stuff that you would have done in hooks in Drupal 8 is actually not done in hooks anymore. It also is giving me the hook theme, which I'm probably not going to need, so I'm going to just get rid of this. I'll leave the implementation of hook help because that's a good idea to have a help page. So I'll leave that there. So now I want to actually go back in core and find out to look at the condition plugin for paths, to look at that file and to figure out how it's making it. So the first thing I want to see is where is this file being placed. So it's under the module file, under source, and under plugin, and then under conditions, so the type of plugin. There's other plugins that the system module provides, but I'm just right now only going to need a condition plugin. So I'm going by this, and I'm just going to assume this is right, and then I'm going to reload the block and see what happens and see if my condition shows up. So the folder structure that I want to make is src, then plugin, then condition, all singular. So I'm going to go down to my module, or my folder, token conditions, and I'm going to hit new directory, and PHP Storm will let me make multiple directories. So src, plugin, singular, condition, singular. So I have to get this right or Drupal will not find it. And if I look at the module or the file that I'm implementing, I can see that the PHP file name and the class name match, and they don't have the word condition in there because it's already in the condition folder, so you know it's a condition plugin. So I'm going to make a new PHP class via PHP Storm, and I'm going to call it token matcher. And I'm going to use a namespace, which is going to be Drupal, and then I want to use the name of my module, which is token conditions. And then I also want to follow the folder structure that I made, but not putting in src. So I'm going to do plugin and then condition. So this will make me a very basic class, and I actually will want to remove this and put a regular Drupal comment there later. It'll make me the namespace, but I want to make sure that I'm making it the same way as the other module. So I want to extend the base class and also implement this interface. So I'm going to copy that, go to my token matcher, and paste that in there. So I see right away that there is an undefined class for both of these. So basically, PHP Storm doesn't know what classes these are. So I want to go back to this one, and it has a bunch of use statements. So I could figure out the one that I need and copy it over, or I can just take these same classes and make my own use statements. So if I say use and then enter that class name, PHP Storm will prompt me for the correct class. In this case, there's only one. So that works. I'm going to copy the other one. And luckily there's only one for this one too. So now I have the correct classes there, but you'll notice that immediately there's an error. And this is one of the really nice things about using an IDE. In my case, I'm using PHP Storm, but other ones like NetBeans and Eclipse also do this. So already I'm seeing some errors, and that's actually a good thing. And what's happening is PHP Storm is telling me basically that I have some problems here because I said I'm extending this class, but there's some things I need to do if I want to extend this class. And there also may be some things I need to do if I want to implement this interface. So if I want to look here, it's telling me that I actually need to declare some methods or implement some methods or declare it abstract. So basically when I'm extending this plugin base, there's some additional stuff I need to do. So I'm going to look at that error. It says you need to implement methods summary, evaluate, create. So it's looking at my class hierarchy. So let's just implement those. So to implement them, I can just I can implement methods here. And it's going to tell me show me my class hierarchy. So I want to go to the condition plugin. Look and see what it is. It's condition plugin base. Which I guess the evaluate is actually from this interface here, which the base class, I guess, implements. So I'm going to do evaluate, and I also want to do summary or create. And it also said summary, which is from condition interface. Okay, so right now we've gotten rid of a lot of these errors. So I'm assuming this evaluate is actually going to be the evaluation of whether this block is going to show. The summary, I'm guessing, is a summary of, okay, what were the condition settings? So if I actually want to look where this comes from, I could see where its parent comes from. So it's not in the condition plugin base. Now, if I get confused about this and I'm not sure where this is coming from, I can actually look at the other class that does this and look and see if it has a create. So it has the create and construct. So two of these methods are put together to basically implement dependency injection. So what's happening here is this create function will be called, and it will get these 4 things that it needs from the container, and these will all be services probably. So in my case, I probably don't need all of these, and this will in turn call the constructor for this, and you'll see that these first 4 things here are going to match the first 4 things in the constructor. So the path alias manager, we'll see this is an implementation of the alias manager interface, or a class an object that implements this interface. And then we have the path matcher service, which is going to be path matcher interface. And then request stack, which is going to be the request stack service, and then the path current. The rest, configuration, plugin ID, and plugin definition. This is something that the plugin system needs. So I'm actually just going to copy these. And replace my implementation. And I'm just going to get rid of the ones that I don't need. So basically right now I don't need any of these. And I'm going to get rid of the definitions or the parameter documentation for everything besides the one I'm actually using. And I want to remove these from the definition. So I'm going to go all the way to current path. So right now, it should say that I don't have any errors besides a missing PHP doc on this class. So I have the evaluate and the summary. So I've implemented all the methods that I need to. Obviously right now it's not going to do anything for me. But let's actually see what happens. And I'm going to say return true. Or actually, I want to see what this evaluate method is returning. So evaluate, it's returning true. So I'm assuming it's returning a Boolean. I could actually go up a level to see in the condition plugin base and look at evaluate. Evaluate's not here. It might be up another level. It's not there, so I should actually, oh, it would be in the interface probably. No, it's going to be in the condition plugin base. So I'm going to go back up there. I don't see evaluate. I'm going to make sure it's going A to Z so I can see it. Execute, evaluate, execute, plugin base. So if I don't know where it's coming from, I could actually just say parent, see if it's on the parent, evaluate, and I want to see where this is coming from. So this is actually coming from the condition interface. So the condition plugin base extends or implements the condition interface. And basically what that means is that any function or any class that's going to implement this interface is going to need to implement these functions. So I need to implement evaluate because the condition plugin does not, and that's why it's an abstract class. So I'm going to go back to token matcher, and I'm just going to return true. So this will always be true. So this could be enough to get my module or my condition on the block page. Let's see if that actually works. So I'm going to go back and actually I'm going to use Drush right now. I'm using a combination of Drush and Drupal Console, and I'm going to enable my module token conditions. So if all went well, and I'm not sure I'm actually here, if I reload this page for configuring the block, then, okay, so I do not see my condition plugin here. So one other thing that I might want to check is I might want to actually clear cache. So actually in Drupal 8, it's Drush CR for cache rebuild. And it's not there. So why it's not there is that I can't, with the plugin system, I can't just implement the right class. I actually need to use annotations so that the plugin system can discover my class. So if we look at the request path, it has a comment in here that has an @ symbol, then condition, and then some information. So this is actually, it is a comment, but the plugin system is actually going to read this. It's called an annotation, and it's going to load the plugin accordingly. So I'm going to copy this and put this into my class as a comment, or my file as a comment for the class. And I'm going to just replace it, say provides token matcher condition. And then the ID of the condition, I'm going to call it token underscore matcher. I'm sort of going along with the pattern that it did as far as lowercase underscores. And then a translation, I'm going to call it token matcher. So anytime I do something like this in Drupal 8, I'm going to want to rebuild a cache. So drush cr, rebuild the cache. So I can go back to the browser and reload. And voila. So I have my space in here. So basically it loaded my condition like it did the other ones. But I have this condition here that just says negate the condition. So basically it's making a form for me, but it's not a form that I made. And if we look at the pages, it also, actually it doesn't have negate the condition. None of these do. So let's see what's going on here. So if there's some functionality that my class isn't making, I can also look at the class that it's extending to see what's going on there. And if I look at the functions in the class that I'm extending, the condition plugin base, there is a function called build configuration form. So I see right here that it actually has this build configuration form, and it is implementing, or it has some functionality here where it's actually going to make this negate condition, this negate checkbox for me. So I want to override this method, probably call the parent, but I want to actually check to see if I want this to still be here, but I'm going to want some extra stuff here also. So I go back to my class, and again I'm going to actually override a method. And if I look in condition plugin base, I'm going to select build configuration form, and I think my cursor was in the wrong place when I did that. So I'm going to put it here, override method, go down to condition plugin base, build configuration form. Now it's in the right place. So it's actually going to call the parent automatically for me. So that's fine, because I do want to leave that form in the checkbox in there. But instead of returning it, I'm just going to assign it to the form variable. So presumably this should actually not change anything. So if I reload this now, well actually, so now nothing is there, and that's because I called this but I didn't actually return it. So I'm going to return form. Okay, so I have the same form there now. So basically in between calling the parent to get what I want to actually add some of my own stuff to the form. So to test this out, I'm just going to make a single checkbox that's just going to say show. And if you're familiar with making form arrays in Drupal 7, a lot of that has not changed. So I can still do the pound type equals checkbox. And then title. And this has changed. So I could call the T function here, but the proper way to do it in Drupal 8 is if I look at the request path and look for any of the T functions, I have this T. So each one is going to have its own access to the T function. So I'm going to say, instead of just calling T directly, I'm going to say this. And another nice thing about PHP Storm is it's going to let me know what functions I have here. So it's telling me I have the T function for translate. So I'm going to say show or not. And that will be enough for right now. Let's just see if that gets there. Reload the page. So I have show or not. So actually I probably want this negate down at the bottom. So I'm going to move this line down to the bottom. I could do it with weights, but this should also work. Negate conditions down at the bottom here. And so I have the checkbox here. I could check it, but obviously it's probably not going to have an effect because the plugin base is not going to know what this show means. But let's just save it, make sure nothing goes wrong. So it saved it there. I'm going to go back to configure block. And I'm going to look at the request path and the functions that it implements to see what's going on as far as maybe saving it. So it has build configuration form. It also has submit configuration form. So that's obviously probably what I want to do. So it is saving, it's getting a value and then it's saving the value. So that's probably what I want to do and then call the parent. So I'm going to copy that. Put that in mine. And so now you'll notice that form state in Drupal 8 is not just an array, it's actually an implementation of this interface, form state interface. So it's going to have methods directly on it, which is a way to get values, which is a lot nicer than going down into the array in Drupal 7. So I am going to copy show and replace their pages, which was their variable that they were using, with show. And I'm going to keep the call to the parent to submit the configuration. And so that should save it. So now, if you'll see here before, even though I had checked the show, it wasn't there. So I'm going to check it here and save it and see if it's there now. So it's still not there, so there's one other thing I need to do. So if we look at the request path and its build configuration form, it's actually calling this configuration to get the default value. So I'm going to do that too. So for this checkbox, I'm going to have a pound default value equals and this configuration, and then again I want to use the same key that I had there. So now hopefully when I save this we'll actually get the value there. So I'm going to hit show, save block. Now when I edit this, we now see show is checked. If I save it without it being checked and we go back, we see it retains that value. So it's now retaining our value. So we're retaining our value, but of course it's not actually going to have any effect right now because it's a condition plugin, but I'm not saying whether the condition is passing or not. So if I look at the request path and look at what functions it implements, evaluate is probably going to be the thing that tells me whether it's going to evaluate true or not. So right now, we have it has its own logic for figuring out how it's going to work. So it has return true if the pages are there. If not, probably return false. It's going to look at this page matcher. But right now, for just our test purposes in our evaluate, I can just say, if this checkbox is checked, then I want to return true. So I'm actually going to change this to a Boolean. I probably don't need to, but just to be safe. This configuration, if it's checked, show it. If not, so return true if it's checked, return false if it's not. So let's test that. So I'm going to leave it as checked, save, and it's there. configure block. I'm going to say don't show it, save, and it's gone. So we now have a condition that works, albeit very simply. You wouldn't actually want to put the block in there if you were never going to show it, but we have something that we can affect the true or false for the condition of the block. Now let's look at how we'd actually compare two tokens, or a token against a literal string. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go and we're going to want to change the form, because right now if we look at the layout form and we are using this content by author, I'll go to configure it, and we have the token matcher with just a checkbox there. We want to change that into two text boxes, one for the token and one for the other string we're going to compare it against. So let's go back to the form that we created. So right now our form is a simple checkbox. Let's change this into a text field. We're going to call this token value and token string to check. And then the default value will be this token value. And again, let's change the configuration here in the submit configuration form to save that value. Let's just copy the text value, text field, should be text field, both places, and let's just call this one check value. We could clean these up later. We'll just call this other string to check for now. And so now we're going to need to actually change save two configuration values here. Okay, so we're saving these two values. So let's see how that works. Make sure that's actually still there. Okay, token manager has two. Let's say this, that. So right now we'd actually have to go in, make sure these values actually change. So they are being saved. So in our evaluate function, let us, instead of just checking to see if this is show, let's for now just check to see if the token value equals the check value. So if they equal, then we're going to show the block. So let's try that. So we'll say this and that, and no other restrictions. So this should not obviously match because this does not equal that. Let's go back to our site. The block is not showing up. Let's go back to block layout and configure the block and say this equals this, which should match. Back to our site, and now the block is showing up. So we could also say this is equal that, which shouldn't match, but we can negate our condition. Save the block. So obviously this is showing up now because this is not equal to that, but we're negating the condition, so it should show up. All right, so let's look at how we'd actually replace a token value. So Drupal 8 comes with token support in core, but like Drupal 7, the token browser is not in core. So we'd actually have to enable the token module to see which tokens are available. I also think the devel module has this, but let's look at how the token module works. So I've already downloaded the token module. I'm putting my modules that I didn't make under, if we close out core and look at modules, there's a folder called Contrib, and I have devel and token, but token is not enabled. So I'm going to enable token, Whoops, messed that up. So I always want to check, especially with I'm using the latest head of Drupal core 8, that the site is not totally crashing from this. So we have the site didn't crash. This is always, a possibility when you're messing with something that's not quite done yet. So if I look right here, there's nothing here. There's no changes as far as tokens. So if I want to see how the token browser works, I probably want to see actually, how can I figure out where the token value is going to show up in the token browser. So that would come from searching the token module. So like I said, Drupal now and Drupal modules, a lot of things that used to be in the .module file are actually in plugins or other PHP classes, but hooks are still in .module. And I'm assuming that to get the token browser to show up, at some point the token module is going to alter a form to throw out the token browser. So I can look inside the token.module file and look for implementations of either token form of hook form alter or hook form ID alter. So I see we have the hook form alter here, but it doesn't seem to be adding the token browser. And then I have a few implementations of token form ID alter. So I have token form block form alter. This doesn't seem to actually put it out there. Then I have the field widget, doesn't seem to put it out there. Then I have the field UI instance, edit form. And if I look here, there actually is a token tree element here. So it's calling the render arrays, the way you make them are still similar to Drupal 7. So it's saying theme and then token tree. This will probably be a twig file in Drupal 8. But I can see here that we have token types, which it's saying is array of nothing. And then as a dialog, that is true, meaning this will be in a pop-up modal window. And then it's just a wait here. So if I wanted to add this browser to my form, I could just simply copy this and go to Token Matcher. And I'm going to just put this down at the bottom of my form. And I'm going to get rid of this wait element here and save it because I'm not worried about the wait right now. It should be at the bottom, but let's just reload. Let's go back to the site and find the block and configure it. So we have this browse available tokens. So this is not showing up for whatever reason. I could check to see if it's a JavaScript problem. It does seem to be there's a JavaScript error there, but I'm not positive it's coming from this. So I'm going to go back to the window, refresh the page, see if I have that error before I hit the token browser. I don't have an error now. So let me go back to configure block, press browse available tokens, look at the JavaScript console window, and there is an error here. So I could try to solve this error, see if there's an issue on the token module. But the other thing I could do for right now is I could go back to this and make it not be a modal. So if I go back to PHP Storm and I have this dialog equal true, I could just say dialog equal false. And now this will make it not come up in a browser, or sorry, in modal. So I'm going to go back and reload this here. If I go to Token Matcher, then now it actually puts the token tree directly on the page. This is probably not ideal. Eventually I'd want to figure out how to make it have a modal browser, but this is fine for now. I can see right here that we have the login page. We have certain tokens we have here. We have random tokens as far as you can make a random number. We don't have any of the node tokens right here, and that's because basically if you look at my token types, I'm sending it just an empty array, which basically means just use the global tokens, not any specific ones as far as node or anything else. But we can actually test this without the node tokens. So let's look at the configuration and try to figure out, are there any here that we could actually check to see if the tokens are working without having node tokens. So there's one, you have the site URL, which is the site's front page. And then we also have the current page, which has the site URL. So we could either check if the current page is the front page, but we can already do that with this pages one here. So if we want to look at some functionality that is not in Drupal core already, we could either check to see if the current page meets some other pattern, or we could say, is the current page the login page? So we have a login URL. So let's take that. And let's look at login URL, and then let's grab current page URL. The other thing we could actually do, let's actually mess with the title right now. So let's check that the title is equal to this node. So if we save this is not, well, actually we're still negating the condition. So let's take off the negate. And right now we are not actually messing with the token at all, so it is never going to evaluate to true. So we want to see how can we actually evaluate the tokens. So to do that, this would not be in the token module because Drupal core has the functionality for replacing tokens. That you don't actually need the token module for. So I would start off by going to Google, and I would say, let's look at Drupal 8 token replace. Yeah, and I have this token replace function. So if I look here, this is on, there's a, I think what I believe is a static function for token replace. So I want to see where is this actually coming from. So I'm going to go one up to token.php. And it's saying that there's a class called token in here. And then there's a replace function that I could call. And it's going to give me an example of return token replace. So this is the class, and then this is the static function here. So if I want to check this, I might want to actually look in Drupal core to see how this is actually done. So I could look in Drupal core. I could look in all of core, but I'm just going to look in the modules folder of core for the replace function. And it's found it a couple places. This is not, so it's finding now replace function where it starts with replace. So I'm going to change this to put a parentheses so I get only the last part. And we have safe markup replace. So I'm not finding it anywhere. So I could be doing this wrong. So let me check to see. This might not be a static function. I'm going to look for calling the replace function this way. Okay, so I have it a few places. So I have it where here we are in an email plugin. So I have this replace token. So this class has its own copy of the token one. And if I see here we have the token manager being sent in via dependency injection. Let's look at some other examples. So I usually skip over the tests. Then we have this one here where it says it's a token service. and this is calling in the replace function. So it's actually calling something where we're calling the Drupal and then calling the static function token. So let's see what this is doing. This returns the token service. So basically it's the same thing as, well, not the same thing as getting it from dependency injection, but the same idea of we're getting it from the container, we're getting a service. And the service is going to return something that extends a class, Drupal core utility token. So I'm going to do it the way that the system module does it. And then I might actually want to look later on to see if I should really be using dependency injection to get it. So I'd want to do this in the evaluate. So I want to look back at my evaluate function. And now I'm just checking to see if they're true. So I'm going to now make a variable called token replaced. And I want to first get the service. Then after that, once I do token service, it's going to actually, PHP Storm knows what class this is going to be, so it knows the available methods. So I can just do replace. And then if I didn't know what to give replace, I can open up the definition of it and look at the docs, where it's going to say the string. So this is the string that contains the tokens. And this is an optional array of data. So this is where I would send in the node tokens. So let's, for now, just send in the string that's going to be replaced, which is going to be our token value here. Wrong place. So we're going to send in the value from the configuration, and that will be the variable we call token replaced. And for now, we're not going to change the other variable, the check value. And let's look at the page here. So right now, it shouldn't show up. Oh, so we have a white screen of death. So let's see what's happening here. So to fix this, I'm going to turn on debugging. So I already have the Chrome extension that PHP Storm provides. I'm going to set it to debug. I'm going to go back to PHP Storm and hit this little telephone icon here, which basically says I want to accept debug requests. And I'm going to put a breakpoint, because I'm assuming something I did here broke it. Oh, actually I can already tell, because PHP Storm is telling me I haven't added this parentheses at the end. So we may get to debugging in a second, but right now I should not need it. It's still telling me there's a problem. Oh, I didn't do the bracket at the end. Okay, so let's reload and see what's happening here. Okay, so it's not finishing, but that's fine because the title is not correct yet. So I want to remember what I put in here. I'm going to go back to block layout. Going to look at the content by author block. And I said this node was the title I'm looking for the current page title. I'm going to save the block. So I didn't have to, I guess. I'm going to go back to the site. And I'm viewing node 10. I'm going to edit this title to match that. And if all goes well, the title should show up and make sure I'm not debugging. Okay, so I'm going to change this random title made by Devel to this node. Scroll down, save and keep published. Okay, so now the block is showing up because this node is equal to the the title now equals the string literal that we wanted to check for. So, but let's say we actually want to have it where we're actually checking for 2 tokens. So right now I can check this is the only thing we're replacing, and I can check against a literal string. But let's say I wanted to check against another token. So if we look at this, I could potentially say, is the current page URL the same as the site login URL? So I'm going to change that, put that here, and save the block. So now it should not show up because we aren't at the site login URL, and we're also not checking the other string for tokens. But let's just confirm that it doesn't actually show up. And I'm going to turn off debugging in case that's making it going a little bit slower. Okay, so the block did disappear, which is what we wanted. So if I want to check both strings for tokens, I can do the same thing with the other value. So I'm sending in the check value now. So basically they have the same functionality. I could either use a literal in one and token in the other, or a token in both. I could use a literal in both, but that doesn't make much sense. Okay, so I'm going to do the check replaced. So now, let's go back to our home page. So I can't really hit the login URL because I'm signed in. So I'm going to log out, and I'm going to put my URL to user/login, and the block doesn't show up. So I'm not sure why that doesn't happen, so now is maybe a chance to actually do some debugging. So we'll hit debug again on the Chrome extension, hit the telephone icon to accept requests, and let's hit a breakpoint just at the first evaluate symbol there. And now let's refresh this page. Now it actually hasn't come here yet, so that could be because either the Chrome extension's not working, or maybe I have to clear cache. So that would be the first thing I'd want to check. So I want to rebuild cache. So I'm going to reload the page again. Okay, so now we've actually hit this part here. Usually if I had never debugged on this site, it would ask me if I want to accept this debug request, but since I've already done this once, it doesn't. So I'm going to step over that. Let's look at token service. We can see that it's an instance of Drupal core utility token. And if let's look at the configuration. So PHP Storm will let us go down here and say configuration, token value equals current page title, and then check value equals site URL. So either site URL is not being replaced, or, oh, I meant to put login URL. So this is potentially, debugging did show us this, but it was my error. So let's look at the checked value, or check replaced. So this is now the home page here. And the token replaced is login because I must have used a different, token replaced is page title and site URL. So I want to change those. So I'm going to, that shouldn't have worked, which was good. Now I want to sign back in. Actually, I will sign in an incognito browser. going to go back to the block layout, go to the content by author block, configure it. So I want to actually get these URLs correct. So I don't want site URL. What I want is site login URL. And I don't want current page title. I want current page URL. So these are the ones that actually I should be checking for. So let's save. Going to go back to the window where I am currently logged out. You reload. Okay, so we're back to debugging. So let's just step over where we've replaced and see what the values are. So now we have check replaced is user slash, it's just user, and then the token replaced is user slash login. So if we go to configuration, we have the token value was current page URL, which turned into /user, and the login URL was actually /login. So we see here that the current page URL, even though in the browser it says user/login, what it's going to know internally via the token is /user. And so it turned page URL into user/login. It turned login URL into /user. So this is is not going to work because we actually need these to match. So even though we're actually, if we look at it, we're actually at user login, what it's going to replace as far as the tokens is concerned, it's going to replace current page URL with user login, and then login URL with just user. So it leaves off this login. So how we could actually fix this is we could manually add login to the end of it. So let's take a look at that. So let's confirm we do not have the token there. And this is actually not a test I had used before. So I could change this configuration here, and where we know that the login URL is actually returning back as user and not user login, let's just tag login to the end of this. So I'm basically saying the login URL plus login at the end. So if I had to go to user as logged in, I don't see the box. If I go it as logged out, let's see what's there. So one thing you'll notice is that as the admin, it didn't actually hit this debug. And so what's happening here is that because that page is cached and Drupal doesn't think it needs to check see if this block is accessed again, it doesn't actually do this evaluation. So let's see, token replaced equals user/login, check replaced equals user/login. So that should evaluate to be true. So it does show the box there. Let's clear our cache and see if that happens for the logged in user too. Let's reload. So you can see here that it never actually is, it's still not checking that page. So I'm going to view a node that I haven't viewed before, hopefully. So I'm going to now edit this node, and I'm going to save it just to see if I can force it to rebuild that cache about what blocks should be available. And it didn't. Oh, so what's happening here is actually the debug's off, that's why. So I'm going to reload it. Make sure we're not debugging. Oh, now we are debugging. So a token replaces user login. This one is just node 14. So, but what if I go to my user page? Now both of these are equal. Oh, no, we have user 1 here. So this is actually going to work because the internal address here is just user 1. But what if I manually change this to just user? It's still not. So it does work only for anonymous users when they're at the login URL. So this works correctly. To get most functionality of this module, you probably want to figure out how you can get tokens, like tokens associated with a node or associated with the current user. So to make this module really useful, we're probably going to want to use other tokens besides just the global tokens. So example, we're going to want to look at the node tokens for the node that we're looking at, or the user tokens if we're looking at a profile page. So for instance, we might want to check if the person who wrote the current node is actually the logged in user, and then show him or her information if they're looking at their own node. Or we might want to show information only on the profile if the person's looking at their own profile. Or we might want to show a certain block if a field on a node is empty or is not empty. So let's check out how we might do some of that. So right now, the example that we looked at in the block layout, so we're going to go back to the block layout. And once we get there, we're going to look at the block that we've been dealing with. And we want to get some information about the current node that we're dealing with. So let's go down to this block, hit configure. And if we look at the conditions besides the one that we made, the token matcher, we have the pages, which doesn't necessarily know anything about the node, but we also have the content type condition. So obviously this knows something about the node. So I want to see how this content type condition is actually being created, because obviously this condition has some awareness of what the main node is on the page. So if I look at it, I should be able to figure out the correct way to get the node on the page. So right now on the pages one, I looked for some text and then I grabbed it and then I searched inside all of the modules folder of Drupal core to find this text, to find where this was being created. If we look here under content types in this form here, there's not much that's here as far as a unique string that I might find only one place in Drupal core. So I'm not easily going to be able to just grab a string and search inside Drupal core to find this. So one thing I could do is I could say, okay, if I know how the pages one, how its condition was declared, and I know how I declared my own condition, how might this content types condition be made? So probably what's happening is another module is providing a plugin or a condition plugin that's going to be on content type condition. So the obvious module to do that would be the node module. So I'm going to look inside the node module and see if I can find this condition plugin. So I'm going to go back to the core modules file, and I'm going to look for the node module. And here it is. Okay, so I have the node module. This is a pretty complicated module, but I still have the source directory, or src directory, then I have the plugin directory, and I have a bunch of plugins here, but the one that we're interested in is the condition folder. So luckily there is only one condition in the node one, and it's in the node condition folder. So it says node type, so that's probably where it's coming from. So again, I could see that this is a class that does extend the condition plugin base and also implements the container factory plugin interface. So similar to our node. And if I look at the evaluate, it's actually going to do something here. It's checking to make sure that the bundles were actually checked, and it's not negative, it's not negated. And then it's going to say get context value node. So right away it's saying, oh, get context value node. Maybe I could use that in mind to grab the node tokens. So I'm going to go to my token matcher, and I'm going to do this right away and just say, okay, I'm going to grab the node from the context of this block. So let's put a breakpoint in there and see what this node is. So I'm going to go back to the site, turn on debugging again, and reload. Okay, so we have our evaluate function. Let me step over that. And then we're going to get the node context here. And hey, we've hit an exception. So if I look at this E, for exception, it says the node context is not a valid context. So that could mean that I'm not on a node page, but you would hope it wouldn't cause this kind of error. So let's play the rest of this out. And we don't have a problem here. We're not showing a problem, so let's actually make sure that under configuration we're actually showing errors. And go to logging in errors. So I must have before shown none, so I'm going to say errors and warnings just for now. I don't need the backtrace right now because I know where the error is coming from. Go back to site. We're here, and I'm just going to play this out. And it's still not showing us an error. So I know there's an error because I've hit it, but I don't know why it's not showing it. But why is this error happening? So I copied what the node type condition was doing, but for some reason it works for the node type and not for mine. So let's go back and look at the node type condition, and let's just search for context in this file. So context value. So right up here in the annotation, there's a context being declared. So it's basically saying, this is a necessary context for this condition. It needs to have a node. So I'm actually going to just copy this and put it back in our file. And I'm going to go to my annotation and copy it in there. Make sure it looks the same. And reload here. So I'm going to go, and I still hit this error. So what's happening here? So what's happening is the annotations aren't loaded on every page. So obviously I need to actually rebuild do a cache rebuild again. So now let me reload. So what happened this time is I didn't get the error, but I actually didn't hit my evaluate. So it could be that the reason it's not happening is because I'm not on a node page. So let's go to a node page. And we still didn't hit it here. So I'm going to save the node to see if I can force it to reevaluate this. Still didn't do it. Let me change something with the node. It still didn't do it. So let's make sure I still have, so it's actually telling me there's an error. Okay, so what's probably happening here is that, did I rebuild the cache correctly? I rebuild the cache. So I'm going to reload the block to save the block again. Because Drupal didn't know that anything changed with the block because it's just my module that's changed and not the block itself. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back to my page and reload. And so now I've hit it here. So what happened was that the block was, whether the block, I should have seen the block on that page was cached because nothing about the block changed. So let me see here. So I want to go in here and hey, I didn't get an error here. And if I look at this node, I can see that it's an object of the class Drupal. I can actually look at it down here. Drupal node entity node. So I got the correct node. Let me just see if I can look inside the values to see the node ID. The node ID is 14. If I switch back to Chrome, I can see, oh yep, I did get the right node. I'm on node 14. So let me just play this out. So right now, I don't actually have a node token, and I'm looking for the login page. So I didn't get an error, but it's also still not going to show the block. So I could change this current block to use a node token and use this same condition here. But I've already seen the problem that my condition is not checked if we're not on a node page. So if we look back at the class, actually not sure why PHP says it's an error because it doesn't seem to, maybe just the error is that this is not being used here. If we look at the class here, I'm saying this needs to be, actually it doesn't like my annotation for some reason. That's okay. So, so what's happening here is this will only work if this condition only gets evaluated if the block system has a node that it can figure out to provide for this context. So this condition now only works if we have a node. So this is not really what I want. So I'm going to actually create another condition that I'll be able to use for this. So I'm going to copy this file and paste it in there. And I'm going to call it node token matcher. So this is actually something slightly different that I'm doing in the actual module on Drupal.org, so you can take a look and see what the difference is there. I'm not going to add it to Git. So this node token matcher, I'm going to want to actually change this class name. So there's something it does not like about this. Let me look at the node type one, see what's different here. Context. Node, I'm thinking it's something small. node type. Okay, so PHP Storm doesn't like it, but Drupal will still load it. So right now I have the node here, node context. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out of the regular token matcher. I'm going to take away this context. And I'm going to take away the call to get the node. So what I'm doing now is creating two conditions, like a global token manager or token condition and one that's specific to nodes. So I'd actually want to change this ID here for the node token matcher. And I'll put in here node token matcher, so that one requires a node and one doesn't. So one I could use just for global tokens and one I could use for global tokens and nodes. So let's rebuild the cache. And let's see what happens. So I actually also want to reload that, save that block once. So I'm going to configure the block. And you'll see here right away I have two conditions now, node token matcher and just regular token matcher. So, and I can see that my node, right now, I guess it sort of lost track of, unless, actually I used the wrong block. So I'm going to go back to content by author, configure it. And we have node token matcher has no settings, and then token matcher has settings. And so it's remembering these by the ID of the condition. So let's reload this. So now we see in our token matcher it does hit our condition. It's not going to evaluate true because we're not on the login page. But now we would have two ways to do this. But if you think about it, if we look at our node token matcher, it's going to be almost exactly the same, except for the fact that when we replace the tokens, we actually want to get the node tokens available to be converted. And when we do the token tree, we also want to check to see, we want to pass in the token types of node. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this node token matcher and I'm going to clear out everything except for the evaluate function for now. I'm going to take away the configuration form. Actually, we'll leave the configuration form for now. The summary I haven't made, so I don't need that. I'm going to take away the constructor and create function. But you'll see right away that this becomes an error because I need some of those functions. So instead of extending the condition plugin base, I'm going to extend the token matcher condition. So this is going to be an extended version of our token matcher condition, except now it's going to be specific for nodes. So all those things that are similar between the two, we only need to put in the base class. So this is the one that will actually get the context of node. And then here on the token tree, we'd want to have this change. So the token tree in this case would be node. So let's look and see if that works now. Let's configure the block again. So we have two token matcher and token, but we still can remove some code from the node token matcher. If you think about it, this form is exactly the same except for this line right here. So what we can do, since this extends our regular token matcher, let's just call the form. First thing we'll do is we'll call our parent, which in this case is from our regular token matcher, and we're going to pass it the form and form state. So this way we can get rid of most everything. And now we actually need only one line here to define the token types. Of an array of node. So the form's going to be exactly the same, except when we build the tree, we want to let it know to show the node tokens. So let's reload this. And we'll look at our regular token matcher. It works with no node tokens. And here it looks exactly the same, except for we have this node token here. So we want to figure out, okay, how do we deal with a node token? And I'm going to actually start to configure another block so we can save our settings in that other block. And let's make a new block. So let's go to block layout. And Drupal core has this custom block library now. So we can actually, I have a block here called your content. And basically all it's going to say is you created this content. And so if we go back to block layout, we're going to place that block in the sidebar first, right in the same area. So I'm going to place the block, and it's going to show me in a second, it's going to show me a list of all the blocks that I have available to place. And we seem to be probably in debug mode. No. Oh, there it is. I'm going to turn off the debugger to save time for a second. And we have this your content, which is a custom block. So I'm going to place it. And I'm going to use the node token matcher now. And I'm going to look at the node tokens, and I'm going to look at node author, and then under node author we have node author user ID, view ID. So I'm going to put that up in the string to check. And now we still have the global one, so I'm going to look at current user. And I'm going to look at current user, and then user ID. So basically what I'm saying is I'm going to display this when the node author is the same as the current user. So I'm going to save this. And go back to the home page. So presumably admin didn't write this, but I can scroll down and see, okay, here's one that's written by admin. And it's not there. So I probably want to debug this and see, okay, why is this not working? I think I already know. So debug. I'm going to put a break in the node token manager one, matcher, and reload. We have our token service. We have actually the token matcher course because it's still going to be evaluated, but that's not the one that we actually have any conditions. So I can actually look here. I can see that the configuration still, okay, so we're evaluating the other block. And now we're at the new block. And if we look at this configuration, we have the token value here. So we also see that we have this context here. It says node context there. So I am going to see that we have the user ID versus that. But this still is probably not going to work. So if I look at the replaced values, check replace equals 1, so that one worked. Token replace, it didn't replace that token. Because we actually didn't tell the replace function about the node. So our class or our function evaluate knows about the node, but we didn't tell the replace method. So let's look at replace, and it's text is what we're sending in, and then we have data. So the data here, if we scroll up here, it's an array of keyed objects for simple replacement scenarios, node user objects, or common keys with the accompanying node. So basically we want to put, we want to give this to the replace functions. So I'm just going to make an array of token data, and you actually can use this shorter form for arrays in Drupal 8 because it's, I think it's a PHP 5.6. So I'm going to say node, and then I'm going to pass it the node, and I'm going to send this token data to both because we don't know where they're going to use the node token. So remember, this is only for the node token matcher. So I'm going to play this out. I'm going to have to reload the page to get it to actually work. So it didn't show up. I'm going to reload. Okay, so now I'm in the node token matcher. So let's look at the values now. So check replaced is equal to 1. And token replace is equal to 1 because that's the user ID. I wrote this. So it should show the block. The block is there. Let's look at our content list and find something that was written by somebody else. So, and it's not showing up there because it's not my content. So now we can see where we can actually get the context from. We actually have two conditions now, one that is only invoked when there actually is a node on the page, and then another condition that would be invoked in any case. So I just want to, before we finish the example, I want to just simplify this code a little bit, because basically our evaluation methods are very similar between the parent and this the child class node token matcher. So I want to simplify this down, and I'm going to simplify this by actually making a function called get token data. Actually, we spelled that wrong anyways. So I'm going to make a protected function get token data. And you'll notice that in Drupal 8 with these underscores, or with the function names, we don't use underscores anymore, we use camel case. Get token data. So I'm going to take that here and just remove that. And now I can just replace both of these by a call to this get token data. So let's make sure that still works. Reload this. Okay, so it still works for the node. Oh, actually, it did not return it. Actually, I'll just return on this line. So let me reload that. Okay, so it's there. Let me look at a node that I actually wrote. So we're checking the condition, and it is passing. So I said I wanted to simplify it, but we still have this the duplicated evaluate function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy both of these here and replace my evaluate function in the base class of token matcher. But the get token data from the base class, actually, we don't have any token data to send it. So let's just return an empty array. So in any case, the replace of the token matcher, we actually don't need the evaluate function anymore. We just need the get token data function anymore. So you can see here that the build function, or the methods that we have to implement on node token matcher, are now down to just 2, and they're pretty simple. So let's actually check and make sure this still works. So this still, actually it didn't. Let's save this block real quick to make sure it's evaluating it. I probably remove the, okay, so now I remove the breakpoint because there is no evaluate method in the subclass. So now we're here, and we have, if we go token replaced is not there yet, but if I look at this, is an implement. So we're actually looking at the first, this is the token matcher class. So next time we go through, this is actually a node token matcher class. So this time when we go through, token replaced should be replaced 1, check replaced equals 1. Okay, so it's still working. Okay, so it's there. So we can simplify the code just a little bit more. So if we see here, we have this implementation of the token of the build configuration form, or we're overriding it just to set this variable here. So we already know our token data. So we could actually get rid of this because we basically just need the keys to this array. So let's get rid of this in the subclass and go back to token matcher and look at our build configuration. And we have our token tree with the empty array here. But let's get our token data again. We won't have the configuration at this point. Let's see. Let's do token data equals this. Get token data. Now we actually just want the keys to that array. So let's say token keys equals array then our token data. And then we'll pass this to the token types. So I haven't tried this before, but let's see if this works. I'm going to go to configure, and this doesn't work because the entity context is not present. So basically what's happening here is we're asking for the token data here, but it's not there. So we might actually want to change this to actually check if this condition context exists first. Or we can make a separate function that says get token types, which actually probably makes more sense. So I'm going to make a protected function, get token types, and it's just going to return the token types that it expects. So the base one will actually have no token types because it's just using the universals, but we'll override this method in the token matcher to return just a variable of node. So right now the subclass doesn't really need to know anything about the building of the form. So let's replace getting the token data there with a call to this get token types. So let's see if that works. Okay, so here we have the regular token matcher. It doesn't have the nodes, tokens, and then we have the node token matcher, which also doesn't have it for some reason. So let's check and see what's going on there. So node token matcher, get token types, return node, return array node, get token types. All right, let's put a breakpoint on this and this. So let's reload this. So now we're at token matcher, returning array of node. So let's look at the form we've created. Form instance settings token tree. Actually, I just copied this. We don't actually need the subarray. Token types array equals node. Oh, I have the subarray here. Oh, yeah, so this doesn't need to be an array. It already is an array. And we also do not need this there. So let's remove that breakpoint. It should work. So token matcher does not have it, and no token matcher now does have it. Let's save the block. So we've simplified the node token matcher a lot. This class here is very minimal now. So you could see in the future how it might be easy to make a user token matcher or a term token matcher for when we're looking at a term or we're looking at a profile page. We'd just have to change the context, change the class name, and then return whatever entity type back instead of the node in this case. So it really makes it easier to add more in the future. So if you look at the token conditions module on Drupal.org, I followed a little bit different of a pattern where I'm really not getting the tokens this way. I may change it to get it this way in the future. One of the problems with this method is that you have to have a different condition for each entity type, and the UI for adding visibility conditions on the block configuration page doesn't allow you to add new conditions on the fly. So as you would have new entity types, you would build up multiple condition tabs, which visibility condition tabs, which might get kind of unyieldy. So, but this is the basics of it. We'd probably want to do just a couple cleanup things. So one thing I'd want to look for in the token matcher is that we're using this anytime you're making a global call in Drupal, you want to check to see if that's the correct way. So I did get this from core, but there was also another way that another module in core was using instead of calling this Drupal token directly. Though the fact that it says that it has this explicit token method on here makes me think that it might be the correct way to do it. But if we look back, if I search back in the module directory to see how I found out how to do that, I'm just going to search and look for this replace function. So in this case, it was actually, this is the email action module, it was actually getting it from dependency injection. So if we see here in the construct, actually starting in the create, they would get this token service from the container, and then the constructor would be passed this. So let's do that method. It's hard in core now to determine what is the best method without, going in and filing an issue. Because it's done in two ways in core, it's not obvious which way is better. So, but let's do it this way for now. So I'm going to copy this get token, put that in our constructor for the token matcher. And another thing that's nice about this is because we're using inheritance, I only have to change it in the base class. So I'm going to go to the constructor, which is somewhere. Or did I get rid of the constructor altogether? Token matcher. The create here. And I'm going to get the token here. And then in the construct, we're going to need to add that, the same thing they have in this email action. Which is we want to add that to the constructor. And then we want to set this token so this means this is a property of this class, and if we see up here they have the token here. So I'm going to grab that and put that up at the top. So basically in our create static function, we're getting the token from the container, and then that way the container will pass it to our constructor and we set it here. And this becomes a protected variable. And so to do that, we would then remove this direct call. See, to evaluate, we have this Drupal token. So instead of, we could either get the token service that way, or we could say this token and we don't need to call it there. So I'm guessing that this is the proper way, though I guess it's yet to be determined. So that way we're using dependency injection to get the token service. So let's see if that still works. Let's go to content. And we'll view a node that I made here. And it got a fatal error. Token magic construct must be a type array object given called in. Okay, so I got the constructor slightly wrong here. So let's look at create this token. Oh, actually, email action. Yeah, so I just got it on the wrong order. So the email, the service is supposed to be at the very end instead. Let's see if that works. Oh. So that should work. Slightly different error. Let's clear our caches and rebuild our cache. Okay, so that's not working. So presumably I can put a breakpoint here. Oh, we have an error here. Oh, I don't need the comma at the end. That was probably it. Argument passed, for passed to construct must be an instance of Drupal token condition, instance of Drupal container token. Oh, yes. Copy the wrong. Oh, so what happened is I just copied what they had, but because they had used a use statement, it knew which version of token it was. And I didn't also add my use statement. So be careful about that. So I'm going to go up to the top, hit use. There's a few options for token. I'm going to guess it's this one, but let me actually go back to the email action one where I got it from and to see what they used. Yes, so let me refresh the page. Crossing fingers, yes, it's working with the profile. So, you know, it didn't change the functionality of the module, but by using dependency injection, the code becomes more testable. Well, thanks for following along. It was kind of a very long introduction to a very short module in Drupal 8, but hope it was informative. Again, I'm Ted Bowman, tedbo on Drupal.org and Twitter. I'm a Drupal trainer, I'm on the Drupal AC podcast, and I maintain some Drupal Contrib modules. If you're interested in Drupal training or consulting, either custom or in person, check us out at 6miletech.com or follow us on 6miletech on Twitter. And if you're interested in Drupal 7 module development, we have an online self-paced video class that guides you through creating 4 Drupal modules. It's a professional level course and it lets you learn by doing. So thanks again. Again, contact us for custom Drupal training, project mentoring, or online Drupal consulting. Have a good one.